Well, Kurt Busch is a hometown hero, and this past week in motorsports news has been crazy to say the least. Let's get into it. This is the fuel. Fucking fly. What's happening, ladies and germs? This is the Packer Man, and welcome to today's edition of the Fuel, where today we'll be talking about the 2020 South Point 400 from the Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Fucking fly. Go away. Lord. I'm trying to do a fucking review here, and I've got fucking fly buzzing around. I need to get some fly traps. But, anywho, what did I think of this race? I don't really know, to be honest, because this is a weird one to kind of think about, because, I mean, the racing, at least most of it, was just kind of crap, you know, but it did stick the landing, though, with Kurt Busch finally getting his first win at his hometown track, and you could see the emotions that were going through him as he stood in victory lane. You know how much this meant to him. Over 30 wins in the top series of NASCAR, and he's won a Daytona 500. He's won a championship, but this is probably going to rank up there as one of his favorite victories of all time. Because it's a win at his home racetrack. You know what I mean? And for years and years, he's been trying to get a win at his home racetrack, and he's never been able to do it until this weekend. Fucking flies. God damn. But we're going to be getting into all of that here in a little bit. But in the meantime, it's time to go through what was a pretty substantial week in the world of motorsports in terms of news stories. We got schedule news, and we also have some big time silly season shit to go through. This was probably one of the craziest weeks of this decade in terms of news stories as far as silly season is concerned. So let's go ahead and get into that. It's time for news of the week. Alright, let's start this thing out with some news regarding the schedule next year. There have been reports saying that the schedule might be released at some point later on this week. Of course, there have been talks about the spring Bristol race being turned into a dirt race. There have been a lot of conflicting opinions on that one in terms of people in the media and the fan base been kind of split down the middle. But first up, let's start with Homestead Miami Speedway. According to reports, it was announced that they would be moving to the second race of the 2021 season. For a long time before this year, Homestead Miami Speedway had served as the championship finale, but then they decided they wanted to go to a different venue this year, which is Phoenix, as my hair is just all over the place today. Starting to grow out again. But it was initially moved to the 6th round of this season, but was postponed due to COVID. But eventually it was a Wednesday night race. But now it's going to be moved to the second race of the season to follow the Daytona 500, which I think logistically makes a lot of sense, because you'll have 2 Florida races to start the year, and it basically alleviates the need to make 2 trips to basically the same state. So it alleviates travel expenses a little bit in that regard. So I think it's I don't mind it. 2 Florida races back to back. Logistically, it makes sense. But the big news as far as the schedule is concerned came in the form of a Texas race. It was reported that the Texas Motor Speedway would be gaining the All-Star race for the 2021 season, which I'm not really thrilled about. But as it turns out, they are losing one of their point states. Okay, so that was kind of unexpected. But where would that date be going? According to reports, it's going to be going to Circuit of the Americas. That's right. The track that has hosted the U.S. Formula One Grand Prix for the last 8 years is going to be finally hosting NASCAR next year, for all intents and purposes. So we're going to have a new. So if it is confirmed, then we're going to have another new road course joining the NASCAR ranks next year, and we have Nashville Super Speedway joining next year as a new track. So it's looking like 2021 is going to be a radically different schedule, and honestly, it's been much needed, because for years and years and years the schedule has been stagnant as fuck. So seeing a lot of new venues coming onto the schedule, it is a nice breath of fresh air. And I've been long saying that Texas Motor Speedway needed to lose one of its dates anyway. And even though it's going to be getting the All-Star race, I mean, it's a non-points event, so it's whatever. But at the very least, it's going to be losing one of its 2 points dates, which it never should have had to begin with. So I think that's pretty cool that Circuit of the Americas is going to be joining the NASCAR Cup Series if they get it worked out and stuff. And hopefully it will be confirmed when they release the schedule. That Circuit of the Americas is going to be joining the Cup Series in 2021. It will be interesting to see how the Cup cars handle that track, and if they're going to run the full circuit. A little bit of side news here. Hendrick Motorsports gets bopped $100,000 for going over their allotted wind tunnel time. So each team is allotted a certain number of hours for wind tunnel testing, which I think this year was 70 hours. And apparently, Hendrick Motorsports went over that allotment by a few minutes. I don't know who screwed that up, but they self-reported that little tidbit to NASCAR. NASCAR ended up finding them $100,000, and they'll be losing 10 hours of wind tunnel time next year. I think next year the allotment's going to be increased to 80 hours, but Hendrick Motorsports is going to lose 10 hours of that for next year. If it was me, someone would be losing their job over that one, because I mean, $100,000. I mean, in this day and age when teams are strapped for cash as it is, I mean, and also losing 10 hours of wind tunnel testing, someone would be losing their job. That much is certain. But with that out of the way, let's get into the silly season news. Let's move over to IndyCar for a second. Zach Veach was released from the 26 car with 3 races remaining in the season. Of course, IndyCar is going back to the Indianapolis road course this week for a doubleheader, the Harvest GP, and then they have the St. Petersburg Grand Prix to end the season. So they needed someone to fill the void, and they tapped old driver James Hinchcliffe to drive the 26 car for the remainder of the season. Of course, Hinchcliffe drove for Andretti years ago when he drove the 27 car, and he's earned 3 career wins in his. I think it's 3 wins in his career, 3 or 4. I don't remember the exact number. It's a lot less than he should have, I'll tell you that much. But he's going to be driving the 26 car for the rest of the season. So basically, this is an opportunity for him to get back with Andretti Autosport, hopefully on a full-time basis. In the meantime, Ross Chastain is going to be driving the 42 car next year. Of course, we knew that Matt Kenseth, it was only going to be a 1-year deal, to replace Kyle Larson. We reported that story earlier this year. But the question was who was going to be driving that 42 car next year. And that question was answered this past Monday, which I'm going to call Monday Madness. The previous Monday, I should say, with all these news stories. But Ross Chastain, the Watermelon Man, is going to be driving for Chip Ganassi in the Cup Series next year. Of course, he led them to a big victory at Las Vegas Motor Speedway a couple years ago in the Xfinity Series, driving their Xfinity program. Of course, DC Solar, with their shenanigans, ended up closing down that team, and Chastain was kind of left twisting in the wind, but has since battled back, and now he's going to be driving in the Cup Series full time next year. So good on him for that, for sticking with it, and super aggressive driver. He's probably not going to make a whole lot of friends out there next year in the Cup Series, but it'll be interesting to see how he handles that 42 car next year. But without a doubt, the biggest news story of this year, for sure, and maybe one of the biggest of all time, is the fact that there is going to be a new Cup Series team starting up in 2021, headed by Denny Hamlin. Yes, Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan. Yeah, that's right. NBA legend Michael Jordan is teaming up with Denny Hamlin to start up a new Cup Series team in 2021, and their driver, Bubba Wallace. And a lot of people are speculating what the number of the car is going to be, more than likely 23 for obvious reasons. But also Bubba, he's been getting a lot of sponsorships signed on with him, so I don't think there's going to be any question as far as the funding is concerned. But this is going to be quite the endeavor, to say the least. But it sounds like they're going to try to hit the ground running, and this is something that you don't really want to go into half-cocked. And Hamlin, I think, even knows that too. Hamlin even released a statement regarding the announcement that him and Michael Jordan are going to be teaming up to create this new Cup Series team. Of course, he's going to be a minority owner at the time, but he did say that this was something that he was probably going to be endeavoring into when his driving career is up. But here's what he had to say. 11 years ago, I met Michael Jordan at a then Charlotte Bobcats game. Yeah, they used to be known as the Bobcats back then, but then they changed their name back to the Hornets. And we became fast friends. Not long after, I joined Jordan Brand as their first NASCAR athlete. Our friendship has grown over the years, and now we are ready to take it to the next level. Tonight, I'm excited to announce that MJ and I are starting a new single-car NASCAR Cup Series team for 2021. Deciding on a driver was easy. It had to be Bubba Wallace. Bubba has shown tremendous improvement since joining the Cup Series, and we believe he's ready to take his career to a higher level. He deserves the opportunity to compete for race wins, and your team will make sure he has the resources to do just that. Off the track, Bubba has been a loud voice for change in our sport and our country. MJ and I support him fully in those efforts and stand beside him. More details about the team will be released at a later date, but for now I remain focused on winning a championship for my number 11 FedEx Toyota Joe Gibbs Racing team this season and in the years ahead. So obviously this is pretty big freaking news that, one of the biggest, celebrities and sports stars, of the last century, basically, and the previous century, to be sure, is now going to be joining the Cup Series as a majority owner. Not since Wendell Scott, all the way back in the 60s, have we seen a black athlete be a majority owner in a Cup Series team. And it'll be interesting to see how that team performs next year, but hopefully they'll be ready to hit the ground running, because starting up a Cup Series team is not exactly an easy endeavor. But it sounds like they are committed to the effort, and hopefully there'll be some good things coming out of that team starting next year. So that's pretty interesting, to say the least. So pretty busy news week, to say the least. Lots of big news stories, of course. Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan starting up Cup team. Circuit of the Americas potentially joining the Cup schedule next year, and Ross Chastain moving up to the Cup Series to drive for Chip Ganassi Racing. A lot of pieces are falling into place. We still don't know who's going to be driving the 48 next year. Eric Jones still doesn't have a ride, so we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the race review itself. Alright, so here we go. The 2020 South Point 400 at Las Vegas. Stages broke down like this. Stages 1 and 2 were 80 laps, with Stage 3 being 107 laps. And due to the formula that they've implemented for qualifying, Kevin Harvick starts from the pole. Interestingly enough, he didn't lead a single lap in this race because he got passed on lap 1 by Chase Elliott on the outside. Kyle Busch gets by Harvick for third, then by Logano for the second position. Had a big gaggle of cars in the mid-pack. Harvick gets by Logano for the third position. Denny Hamlin looks fast early on, almost up to the top 5 after starting back in the mid-pack because, you know, he hasn't had his first round of the playoffs wasn't really good, but that's why he had all them playoff points. We had our first caution on lap 26, which is a competition caution. I'm just going to go ahead and say it right here. I think competition cautions are a waste of fucking time. You know, that's just me. Everyone comes in for service. Kurt Busch wins the race off pit road, so he leads on the restart. Hamlin gets the lead on the restart. Logano gets by Busch for second. Harvick and Elliott start battling for the 4th position. Truex gets up to 5th by Harvick. And Denny Hamlin wins stage number 1. This stage was so fucking boring that I almost ended up taking a nap on the couch. Like, it was ridiculously boring. Everyone comes in for service. Kurt Busch wins the race off pit road. So we get to stage number 2, and this is where things started to pick up a little bit. Logano gets the lead on the restart, but Denny Hamlin takes him and Kurt Busch 3 wide into turn 3. I don't think Kyle expected that, so he kind of reacted to kind of move up out of the way and actually got into the 22, actually body slammed them, which caused a tire rub on the 22 car. So he had to make an unscheduled stop to get the fender repaired, and it would basically take him all race just to get back to the lead lap and salvage a top 15 finish out of it. So we had our first pure lead change of the day with Denny Hamlin taking the lead on lap 88. Like I said, Logano had to make an emergency stop to repair the fender. Elliott with a run to turn 3 takes the lead from Hamlin, so we have our second pure lead change on lap 92. Hamlin closes back in on Elliott after the 9 had gotten out to about a second lead, but then he started closing back in over the long run. Truex kicks off green flag pit stops on lap 118. Then Johnson gets nabbed for speeding. Ouch. He did recover to finish 11th, though, so that was a nice little recovery. Byron was staying out and stretching the fuel run. Chris Buescher and Ryan Newman stretched it out even longer, but did not get the caution they needed. Buescher finally pits on lap 146, which cycles the lead back to Chase Elliott. Hamlin actually tries to catch Elliott for the race win, or the stage win, I should say, and he was right there and almost caught him, but Elliott does end up winning stage 2, and Reddick has a flat right front tire at the end of the stage. Everyone comes in for service, and Hamlin wins the race off pit road. So now we begin stage number 3, which was 107 laps. Hamlin leads the start of stage 3. Alex Bowman, who seems to have really come alive here lately after a pretty unimpressive summer stretch. I mean, he started out really good with the win at Auto Club, but ever since then, it just seemed like he had fallen off the map. But now with the playoffs beginning, it seems like that 88 team has refound its mojo because they finished in the top 10 5 of the last 6 races. Bowman with a run on the inside and takes the lead on the restart. So, I mean, and he had a good run at Las Vegas in the spring when he and Ryan Blaney had that great battle that was ruined by that late race caution, if you all remember. Hamlin and Elliott trail Bowman for the race lead. Hamlin gets a great run into turn 1 when Bowman takes it a little bit too high into the turn, or around the tri-oval, I should say, and he is able to retake the lead for a third pure lead change on lap 172. Elliott gets by Bowman for second, and then we have our second caution on lap 191 for Debris. Everyone comes in for service, and Hamlin wins the race off pit road, and Austin Dillon gets penalized for a pit road safety violation. So basically what happened was one of the crew members who was over the wall tried to grab one of the tires and ended up falling over the wall, and it ended up being too many men over the wall. So there you go. Hamlin leads on the restart. Matt DiBenedetto goes 4 wide with Truex, Bowman, and Elliott for second. It's still not confirmed if he's going to be back with that 21 car next year. So he is driving the wheels off that 21 car, and he did a pretty good job in this race too. Bowman gets by DiBenedetto for second. Elliott gets by Truex for fourth. Dillon was going to try to go the distance on fuel, but then loses the belts off the engine. Basically, the water pump belt, the power steering belt, the oil belt, I think, stayed on. But yeah, the most important thing was the water belt and the power steering belt, because you could see like the water streaming out the right side, and when the water belt is knocked off and it stops spinning, that water heats up real quick. And he said that the temperature got up to 330 degrees in the engine, which is way too hot. I mean, He's lucky he didn't cook the engine at that point. But that basically ruined what was a great run by Dillon. I mean, he's been very impressive in these playoffs. You know, a lot of people figured him to be a first-round exit, but if anything, he put up one of the most impressive performances in the first round. But this is really going to set him back here in the second round, and with Talladega and the Charlotte Roval to contend with, a lot of everybody who's not locked in to the round of 8 at the moment, they're going to be on pins and needles, to say the least. Truex gets by Elliott and DiBenedetto to move up to third. Kyle Busch kicks off the final round of green flag pit stops on lap 231. Bowman passes Hamlin after they make their pit stop, but then Jimmy Johnson cuts down a right rear tire and sheds debris on the track to bring out the third caution on lap 236 in the middle of a green flag cycle, and there were several cars that did not come down pit road yet. So this completely turned this race upside down. Matty D was the big winner. He was actually on pit road when the yellow came out, so he basically got a free pit stop. So he was able to stay out and become the leader. And then there were others who were lucky enough to be on the racetrack when the caution came out, and everybody else, you know, was a lap down. So they would get the wave around, but they would be restarting behind the guys that hadn't come in yet. And those guys were Kurt Busch, John Hunter Nemechek, Chris Buescher, Christopher Bell, Michael McDowell, Matt Kenseth, Ryan Newman, and Corey LaJoie. But the guys in the catbird seat at the moment were Matt DiBenedetto and Kurt Busch. Matty D led on the restart, but Kurt Busch gets the lead on the restart. And at this moment, I looked at the top 5 and I'm like, what is this? The top 5 at this point was Kurt Busch, Matt DiBenedetto, Christopher Bell, John Hunter Nemechek, and Ryan Newman. Of course, in the case of the 38, that did not last long, as he brought out the 4th caution on lap 250 when he spins out a 4th with a possible flat tire, and Stenhouse gets sandwiched by Eric Jones as the two tried to avoid the 38. That was just, you know, an unavoidable incident. Hamlin leads a group of playoff drivers onto pit road tires, which would end up playing a big part near the end of this race. Kurt Busch leads with 12 laps to go, and he gets a great restart. 3 wide behind them all the way through the field. Bowman gets up to 3rd. Bell smacks the wall, but it's still green. Hamlin is up to 5th at this point. And then we get our 5th and final caution on lap 260. William Byron gets into the back of Bell as the 95 cuts down a tire, of course, after smacking the wall. Corey LaJoie gets damaged as he tries to avoid the spinning 24 car. So you would think, GG Hamlin. But Kurt Busch was not going to let that happen, as he leads on the green-white checkered. Got another great restart, and that basically won him the race. Hamlin tries to get up to 2nd, but Matt DiBenedetto holds him at bay. And Kurt Busch holds everyone at bay to finally win at his home racetrack. And it was a celebration indeed. And honestly, he deserved to celebrate in front of a crowd. There wasn't a crowd at the racetrack this week, unfortunately. But it was pretty clear that this meant a lot to him. And he gets back to victory lane for the 32nd time in his career, and it's probably going to be, he will consider this probably one of his biggest wins, simply because it was his home racetrack win. And that was the South Point 400 at Las Vegas. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at the results and the point standings, and give you the lead change count and my star and reject of the race. Alright, top 10 finishers for the South Point 400. Kurt Busch with the win, leading the final 29 laps of the race. Matt DiBenedetto comes home in 2nd. Denny Hamlin with a spirited charge led 121 of the race's 268 laps, but ends up with a 3rd place finish. Martin Truex Jr. with yet another top 5, finishing in 4th. Alex Bowman, top 5 for him. Kyle Busch, after his troubles, salvages a 6th place finish. Ryan Blaney in 7th, Eric Jones 8th, Chris Buescher with a top 10, ending up in 9th, and Kevin Harvick, who was pretty much a non-factor the entire race, which is a bit of a surprise, rounds out the top 10. But he still earned quite a boatload of points in this race, though. But point standings with 6 races to go, and we're entering Talladega. Oh boy. Kurt Busch He doesn't have to worry about Talladega or the Charlotte Roval. He's through to the round of 8, which means that Kevin Harvick, he's number 2 right now, but he's plus 61. Denny Hamlin is plus 58. And, you know, those two are pretty much far and away from the rest of the field. If they manage to leave Talladega with a plus 56, then they will be locked into the round of 8 without having to worry about the Charlotte Roval. But from there on back, look how tight this is. Brad Keselowski in 4th, plus 16. Martin Truex Jr. in 5th, plus 15. Joey Logano in 6th, only plus 11. Chase Elliott only plus 10 in 7th. He was actually up there in the top 10, but got held up by Ryan Newman on the final restart, or I think the restart before that, and ended up with a 22nd place finish. Lost a boatload of points. Alex Bowman, even though he had a top 5 run, he's 8th in the standings, only plus 9, which means that Kyle Busch is below the cut line, but he's only 9 markers back. And then you have Clint Boyer, Eric Almirola, and Austin Dillon, who are in a spot of trouble. But Clint Boyer says that, you know, he's looking forward to going to Talladega, and he says the Charlotte Roval is also a race that he's looking forward to as well, because, you know, those are 2 of his better tracks, it seems like. But Austin Dillon, I think he'll be good at Talladega. Eric Almirola, of course, he got a top 5 going backwards in the spring race, so it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. Kyle Busch, I mean, he's not going to give up. I mean, and he's won at Talladega before, so we can't count him out either. In this race, we had 20 overall lead changes, which is a pretty good number. Thing is, only 3 of those were pure lead changes, which means that a lot of the lead changes that we saw were either on the restart or exchanges of green flag pit stops. Not really much on track, legitimate green flag passes for the lead, which kind of sucks because Las Vegas, the last couple of times out, has actually been a pretty good race. You know, we've seen quite a bit of lead changes in that regard, and pure lead changes as well, but this time around, not really so much. Kind of a shame, but you know, it is what it is. Star of the race. This one's kind of a toughie. Who am I going to give it to? I was going to give it to Kurt Busch, of course, for his victory, but I think because of his spirited effort, due to the fact that he doesn't know if he's even going to have a ride next year, or he's going to be with that 21 car next year, I'm going to give it to Matt DiBenedetto this week for a spirited effort to try to win this race at Vegas. He actually also finished 2nd, I think, in the spring race as well. So, back-to-back runner-ups at Vegas. And basically right on the, you know, the rear deck lid of the leader. So considering that his future is not exactly secure, Kurt Busch I think is going to be back in that. I think they signed Kurt Busch to return in 2021, but DiBenedetto is not certain at this point. So, you know, I think he deserves to have star of the race this week because of his extremely spirited effort. Reject of the race. I'm actually going to give it to something that is not a driver. I am going to give reject of the race to Austin Dillon's engine belts. Because, I mean, what a shit-tastic time for that to happen. You know, with Austin Dillon, I mean, and they actually had a strategy because they had, when they got that penalty, they actually came back in and topped up. So they were probably going to try to make it the rest of the way on fuel. Of course, you know, with the cautions that came out, they kind of threw that strategy out the window. But they were going to try to make it all the way on fuel, and, you know, due to bad luck, they lost a boatload of points, and now they're pretty much in a must-win situation at the moment, minus 32 from below the cut line. So, I mean, that was just terrible luck, you know, on their part. You know, nothing you can really do about that. So, my reject of the race is Austin Dillon's engine belts. And that's what I got to say about that. As for my final rating for the 2020 South Point 400, this is a bit of a tough one to rate because, I mean, we didn't have that much in the way of pure lead changes. I mean, we had a lot of lead changes, and the restarts were, of course, crazy, but that's the way it usually is. The first stage of this race was boring as fuck. I mean, I nearly went to sleep. It did pick up in the second stage, and of course you had the craziness of the third and final stage. Of course, Jimmy Johnson's cut tire, pretty much turning this race upside down and getting surprise winner out of it. I mean, it wasn't as good as previous Las Vegas races, unfortunately, but I still think this was a decent enough race, and seeing a surprise winner, I think, makes up for it as well. So, my final rating for the South Point 400, I'll give it a 5.25 out of 10. I think that's a fair rating. Kind of in the middle. Like I said, the first stage sucked. And then it started picking up after that. And then, of course, the what the fuck ending, with that caution coming out. And that's pretty much going to do it for the fuel this week. Next week, Talladega. Oh, boy. So, if you love big numbers, get ready to see that lead change counter roll over many, many times over. Much like the spring race. I mean, if memory serves me correctly, there were nearly 60 overall lead changes in the spring race and over 40 pure lead changes. So, hopefully we'll see a similar number this time around. And, man, it's going to be hard-pressed to match the finish that we saw in the spring, but I think it's going to be a wild one, especially with the playoff implications. So thank you very much for watching this edition of The Fuel. And until next time, this is the Packerman signing out. See you later. You better like and subscribe or face the consequences. You have been warned.